Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well, and welcome to, depending on wherever you may live or however you choose to read your clock, this early morning, middle of the night bonus upload. Before we jump into it, a couple quick links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support the channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost a cent. Click the like button. Takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads that I put out daily, click that bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment. Why? Well, because all of these things really do help this channel to continue to grow and go. And yes, they definitely do matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump in to this early morning or middle of the night bonus upload, shall we? Today's first part of the upload. I grew up near the LBL, and there was a place called Vampire Hotel that was actually a foundation from a hotel during the 20s that was torn down in the late 90s. Now, I never personally met a vampire in Murray or around the LBL, and have no clue as to why people called it Vampire Hotel. But we spent many a night there partying and never saw anything weird except melting candles and wavy walls. I do, however, have a story that was told to me by two of my uncles. At a bottom near Marshall County, Callaway County line, very close to Kentucky Lake, which is the LBL basically. It really scared the crap out of me when I was a kid because they swore they would never go back to that area. And they are real outdoorsmen who don't get scared very easily, or so I thought. The story goes that my two uncles were coon hunting. They had 3 coon dogs with them, their best by their account. They heard a yelp ahead. Well, the 2 dogs went running by them like they were being chased by something, and the other one was nowhere to be found. Now, most people don't know this, but most coon dogs are mean as hell and don't back down from anything. Not in West Kentucky, anyway. My uncle said that when he saw the dogs running back toward them, something bad was going on because this never happened. He said they made their way to where they heard that yelp and found the missing dog. It had been attacked by something, and he had to shoot it because it was so badly hurt. They had no clue what could have done this other than a bear or some other really big animal. But in this area of the country, we really don't have big predators that we know of. A black bear was spotted in northwest Tennessee in the early 2000s, but never in the LBL. Now, the really weird stuff started happening, they said. When they were shining their lights around the dog's body, they said they didn't see any tracks, and then they heard a loud scream behind them from where they had just been. And it was like nothing they ever heard before. Well, at this point, they decided to shag ass back to their truck, and something threw a rock or something at them. They couldn't tell what was thrown, but something flew through the air and hit the tree. On their way back to the truck, they said they kept hearing things in the brush, and then they would hear something in the trees, like they were being stalked by something that was able to get into the trees, and they never did see anything except branches moving, like something had just been there. They said they fired some shots to try to scare whatever it was that was following them, but whatever it was followed them all the way back to their truck. When they got to the truck, the 2 other dogs were lying down in their cages, and they said they never hunted that area again. Now, this story was told to me by 2 uncles who did their fair share of drinking while hunting. You only coon hunt at night, so it definitely was dark, but I see no reason that they would lie about it. I know the dog did die. I can only add that I never seen either of them look. Scared, especially while hunting, but they said something was out there, and they never encountered it before. They had lived there their whole life since the 40s. Something killed Uncle Dale's favorite dog, which I would have thought would have pissed him off more than anything, to make him want to kill whatever was out there, but he swore he never would go back out there again. Today's second encounter. I used to believe Dogman were fake until I saw one summer. It was around dusk and I had settled in, but it was still light enough to see. All of a sudden, my friend busts through the front door yelling about something in the neighboring field. I decided to entertain him and followed him out to the field. We walked about a half a mile, and I still didn't see anything, and I wanted to go back, but he insisted. So I reluctantly followed, and just before we reached the old slaughtering house, I saw a rather large canine about 70 feet away. It was sitting on its haunches, and I thought, that's a big dog, until it stood up and ran on both legs toward the old slaughtering house. Both of us thought it was a rather good idea to head for the hills, so we headed back to my house, and it followed us. By then it was dark, so we were about to retreat to my house and lock up. And then came a smell so foul and terrible. I still remember it. That terrible smell was only comparable to rotten human flesh. Just then it ran in front of us, about 30 feet away. I estimated its height to be 7.5 feet. We bolted in and stayed there for the rest of the night. But the dogs in the neighborhood would not stop barking. We went outside in the morning and the smell still lingered. The smell stayed for days, and on the third night around midnight, the sound of a window being forced out woke me up. I took a knife and explored and found that a window pane had been completely forced without breaking the glass. After the smell disappeared, and I haven't seen one since. There's no explanation for the animal, and there was no evidence, so I really don't know. I did decide to share this, but I really don't know what it was. I live near LBL and people tell stories of a beast like the one I saw. Today's third part of the upload. I moved to a small town near LBL when I was 16. That was in the late 80s. I'd left Detroit and moved to the country with my dad. There's a lot of old ground in that area, and I would spend hours in the woods without ever seeing anyone. Two things struck me as odd about the area. Number one, I was given a 16-gauge shotgun and told never to go in the woods unarmed, which was odd because in Detroit my dad always told me not to get involved with guns. Number two, there were signs along the roads back then that said, do not exit your vehicle during hours of darkness. They said to lock your doors and turn on your hazard lights and wait for park services. I'd always assumed it was due to the amount of illegal activity that took place in LBL. They used to make moonshine in the area. Now it's mostly meth. I was stationed at Fort Campbell and used to hike LBL several times a week up until last year. I never saw anything out of the ordinary, but I stayed on well-used trails. Today's fourth part of the upload. A woman and her son who live on a mountaintop in Breeding, Kentucky had reported what they described as a dogman, werewolf, bipedal canine type of creature. The woman said that the possible cryptid had been heard howling in a close vicinity of their property, and that one night the thing banged on the side of her house. They shot at the creature, but no blood or prints were found afterward. They also report that they have found evidence of something prowling around their land and still occasionally hear the howling, now in the distance. Kentucky has many canine-like related sightings and legends. The beast between the lakes, the wolf man that roams western Kentucky. There are others, including an interesting account from Bath, Kentucky. People who have seen Barilla say it's a beast with wolf-like features. Sounds like something found in fairy tales, but some researchers say people have seen the creature and even been attacked by it for decades right here in Kentucky. In Lex 18 Mystery Monday, Courtney Fisher goes in search of evidence of its existence.
Kentucky's backwoods keeps quite a few secrets. Secrets that, if you're lucky, will reveal themselves, but some, no matter how patient you are, stay hidden. Barilla lurks in the woods, so the experts say, with the last known sighting occurring in 1989. The broad-shouldered beast has a body of a bear and a long, pointed muzzle like a wolf, hands with dagger-like claws and canine teeth. It's allegedly been seen through parts of Kentucky, Wisconsin, Michigan, Canada, Pennsylvania, with dozens of sightings reported. Of course, the first case in 1940s, said researcher Ron Coffey. A young boy claimed to be attacked on a creek bank by the creature. I don't discount that many eyewitnesses. Everyone's just not imagining things and making it up. Coffey's not found any bones or remains, but says he can prove Barilla exists, a plaster cast of footprint Coffey has. He found the track last winter in Bath County, and it matches the description of Barilla's footprint. Every single legend is based on some kind of fact, he states. Stories don't just materialize. Coffey may have been researching Barilla for more than 2 decades, but there's another person who's had eyes on the woods for just as long, and he lives right across the street. I think someone's trying to start a good hoax, said skeptic John Poe, with a laugh. That's my opinion. Poe says he has his own proof there is no Barilla. His roosters and his chickens roam the yard, and they have never been attacked by the monstrous beast. At night time, it's always peaceful and quiet, he said. You don't hear anything going on. And that's enough for Poe. To know that no 7-foot wolf-like creature is lurking the woods across the way. I'll believe it when I see it, he states. But Coffey says it's only a matter of time until another clue surfaces and another eyewitness comes forward, proving Barilla exists. Lex 18 wanted to talk to someone who claims they've actually seen Barilla, but Coffey says the last surviving witness recently died. That last part was a old news footage from Kentucky station, Lex 18 obviously, and covered the mysterious dog-like creature called Barilla. I've covered a few stories of the Barilla, which is just another name for a Dogman. Like the Gugwi is just another name for the type 3 Sasquatch Kumbo discusses, or / werewolf. Too many names and too many confusion, I guess, with so many names. But the important thing is we know that there is something bipedal, hairy, that lurks the woods. Some look like an ape, some look like a huge, gigantic dog. Who knows? Today's fifth part is a little more history on the land between the lakes. The National Recreation Area in western Kentucky that also runs down to Tennessee, called Land Between the Lakes, or LBL for short. It's situated between Kentucky and Barclay Lake, consisting of more than 300 miles of shoreline, 17,000 acres of forest, and over 200 miles of walking trails. It's currently a focal point for over a $6 million in tourist industry. Prior to 1959, before Kentucky and Lake Barclay dams were constructed, and before it was officially called LBL in 1963 by President John F. Kennedy, and before TVA, Tennessee Valley Authority, the federal government used its powers of eminent domain to buy and tear down all the houses, businesses, and community buildings throughout the area, forcing over 700 families to give up their homes, took over the land, and the area was called Between the Rivers. There's over 228 small family cemeteries, many forgotten about and lost, dotted throughout the area, as it was once used as homes for the early Kentucky settlers. Some of the earliest graves date back to the early 1700s, which include graves of white settlers, veterans from nearly every war, including the Revolutionary one, and also those of black slaves and Chinese immigrants who worked in the iron furnaces that were in the area. There was also a very high infant mortality rate, and many of these children were buried right outside of their cabins from where they were born, so that their mother could peer out of the window and see the grave. There are also numerous Native American graves scattered throughout the acres, much older than even the earliest settlers. Others lie in secret beneath layers of leaves and forest ferns. Before the 1950s, it was always been a very rural area to live, with farmsteads far and few between, and with really no town to speak of except up at the north end of Grand Rivers. It was in this town, back in the mid-70s, that the beast between the rivers, or what is now the beast of LBL, was heard from. Some of the old-timers would sit on long wooden benches outside of the IGA that used to be an old country store for decades before the grocery conglomerate came to town. We used to hang around there on the weekends during the day and listen to stories they would tell each other. These old men, most of whom lived in the LBL before they were forced to move, had some very interesting stories to tell about the part of that country. There was talkings of hauntings, Indian curses, mysterious lights over gravestones at night, an old hag witch that lived deep in the woods, and more importantly, several tales of a wolf-like creature that stood on two legs that would come out of the thickets and attack their cattle and livestock day or night. A creature that was taller than the average man by well over a foot, nearly 7 foot tall, with thick, long hair covering its body, and the stench that matched, that some compared to open, fresh graves that were discovered now and then. This wolf creature left tracks like a barefooted man, but where the toes should have been, instead of were paw prints. The head was huge and wolf-like in appearance, with an extra long snout and uncanny long, sharp incisors that glistened from the moonlight with saliva, along with the eyes that radiated red, like those from the hottest fires in hell, they said. It had long arms that ended with huge hands, and long, spindly fingers with long, pointed, dirt-caked claws. At night, they would hear it howl, unnaturally guttural sounds of painful hunger and agony, and at that warning, all would go out and tie up their livestock, and even bring their prized selections inside of their homes with them. The legend of this beast went back at least hundreds of years and was passed along through time from family to family and updated as new sightings occurred. One old man said that his great-great-great-granddaddy told him the creature used to be a man, a Native American, that had the ability to shapeshift, a powerful shaman that had been outcast from his tribe because he used his magic for evil. The shaman had been tracked and killed while in his wolf state by a few warriors and a couple of settlers in the area. In his dying breath he cursed them and vowed to return from the dead to haunt the forests and seek revenge on their families and all who lived there. Another man on the bench with a leathery, weathered face said he heard from his grandma the beast was once a settler that came over from Europe back in the early 1800s with a disease that made him turn into a madman at night. The disease was eventually passed along to his children, which never went to school but stayed hidden away from the population. Many thought the family died off because for years they never seen or heard of them, and after investigations by some brave men, they discovered the homestead vacant and abandoned in the early 1900s. The sighting of the monster were still frequent throughout the beginning of the 20th century, and the elderly group on the bench each told some unsettling encounters they or members of their family had had with it. Each one told stories of finding livestock slaughtered, ripped to pieces, and eaten upon. Cows and pigs with their legs dismembered from the sockets. Even a few horses had met their end with savage attacks upon their body. A few of them described But they saw at different times when they only caught glimpses of a figure by peeking out of the curtains or windows at night. One man said it jumped out of one of the horse stalls one evening while he was putting some animals up. It stopped in front of him, arms spread out like it was going to grab a hold of him, let out a howl, and sprang past him into the dusky shadows. This particular man said he wet his overalls during the episode. Another man said he never seen it, but would always hear its baleful wails frequently through the night. Not like the regular wolf or coyote. No, he said. It was more deeper, longer, stronger sounding than anything that would come out of any animal I have ever heard. Another old-timer said his wife had seen it trying to get into the chicken coop, but gave up after it got tangled in the chicken wire. They all had tales of someone's hound dog getting killed, ripped apart limb from limb, someone's pig or cow or chicken getting eaten, the mysterious footprints left in the mud, and the stench it left behind wherever it appeared. And more than one had the same story of listening to the walk across their front porches at night, and the scratches on their doors and walls, which would leave deep gouges in the wood. They would find that in the morning. All of them agreed that this was not a Bigfoot or Sasquatch. It would be only another year or two after hearing about this mysterious beast that I would have an encounter myself. Now, these are statements made from Jan Thompson, who grew up in the LBL, and her encounter I've shared on this channel just a couple of days ago. Her nephew was ripping through the woods on the trails with his dirt bike, and the creature followed him home, tearing his Levi's and causing, a gash in his leg. The creature then stalked these young kids to their home. They barricaded themselves in the house, hid under the bed until the aunt or mom came back, and then it was gone. Very terrifying encounter, but a little more history that I wanted to share with you. Today's final part of the upload is an encounter that happened right around that area. It was probably a couple years ago. No, actually 2013. I had just started driving my truck. I got my truck after being trained and everything. I drove from Milwaukee, Wisconsin to Cherokee, Alabama. I've been driving. I didn't drive straight through, but I got up early this one day and got my load there on time. I was taking this load of paper, scrap paper, to Cherokee, Alabama, to a plant that makes tissue down in Cherokee. So I had gotten up early to finish out my load so I could get there on time. I drove probably 8 hours or something like that. Got my load delivered, picked up my trailer, got a hold of my dispatcher to find out what he wanted me to do next. He didn't have any work for me, so I said, I'm going to lie down for a little while. So I went in a little truck stop that was just down the road and took a nap. Got up and decided to have some lunch. Got some lunch, and while I was eating my lunch, I decided to get my next load, which was in Decatur, Alabama, which was probably an hour away or something like that from where I was in Cherokee. Maybe a little more, maybe a little less, somewhere in that range. So I went to pull out on this road, and there was this big black truck, all lifted up, all jacked up and everything. A large pickup truck. So I thought I'd let him go first, because he was moving. So when he passed, I pulled out and I got the whole truck straightened out. I got probably maybe, if I'd have to guess, 30 feet away from this guy. There's a big U.S. highway down there in Alabama. There are 2 lanes going one way and 2 lanes going the other way, divided by medians between them and then trees. You're kind of driving through the woods, trees on both sides of the road. If I had to guess, it was maybe 50 yards from the trees to the trees, maybe a little more, something like that. I'm driving along, just getting the truck straightened out, seeing what's going on around me. All of a sudden, out of the woods to my right, this thing came running, and it was running fast, and I mean fast. I didn't know what it was, but I knew it was fast. So fast that I couldn't really tell you what it was, But I tell you this, it made that clearing from the woods to the road, which I could tell you was a good-sized clearing. It made that clearing from the woods to the road in about 10 steps. That's how fast it was going. That's how big the strides it was taking. But anyway, it crossed out in front of the road, and that big black truck in front of me, I don't even know if he knew that he hit it, but he hit it. Hit it right in the hip and turned it around, twisted around, and it fell in a ball on the shoulder. The guy didn't pay no attention to it. I was thinking, what the heck was that thing? I know what it looked like, but I didn't want to sound crazy, so I drove by it. My windows were down because I was smoking, and so I'm slowing down to kind of look at it and see what it is. I'm looking out my window, and it's balled up in this ball. Whatever it was a big ball. This truck was jacked up, and it hit this thing in the hip, and it fell into a ball on the ground. When I drove by it, it was not dead, but it was mad, and I could see it. I could see all its hair. I couldn't see it, but it was mad. You could hear it, making this loud grunting noise like it was pissed. I went, well, whatever. I was like, I think I just saw a Bigfoot. Again, I don't know what it was. But I swear to God, I was not tired. I was not crazy. This thing wasn't big, enormous, like 7 or 8 feet tall, like how you'd think a Bigfoot would be. It was probably 6 feet tall. It wasn't enormously large, but still big. You could see when I drove by. Loaded with muscle underneath all that hair. I got my load and I drove for a little while, got parked for the night. Called Mrs. Irish Smoking Man, told him about it. They were still in amazement. My mom said, why didn't you go back and take a picture? Because I didn't know what it was. A bear? If it was a Bigfoot? I didn't know what it was. All I knew was that it was mad, and I wasn't going to figure out what it was in case it ripped me in half. Got home that weekend. We had a big party because my ex-sister-in-law had just graduated from nursing school. We all went out to dinner. Me, my brother, family, and her family and everything. We're kind of close with that family. So I told her dad about what I had seen. And he said that it was a bear. I never seen a bear other than in the zoo or on TV, so maybe it was a bear. But when I think of a bear, I don't think of a bear as running on its hind legs. When a bear gets up on its hind legs, it's more of an intimidation type thing. I see him take a couple steps, but I don't see him full out sprinting, running, and always think of that bear's hind legs. At least my head being a stubby kind of legs. This thing was fast, and it had big, huge, like normal people legs. But it had big, long arms. It took that stride like 10 steps before it crossed the road, and then crossed the road in like 2. That's my encounter, I guess. I don't know if it was a Bigfoot, Dogman, or what, but that's what I saw. The land between the lakes, or the LBL, is a secluded wilderness area that straddles Kentucky and Tennessee borders. The 170,000-acre area is designated as a National Recreation Area by John F. Kennedy in 1963. People have been going here for decades, hunting, fishing, camping. In all of that time, the national park has had its fair share of strange stories and mysterious happenings. Locals have told tales of haunted campgrounds, of vampire hotels, and the famously known Bigfoot. The land has also particular events that cannot be explained. A lot of people, while following many of the game trails, have reported feeling like they are being watched. Now, even more unsettling still, that these people swear they are being stalked by whatever is watching them. Other instances include hunters noticing strange hunting patterns that do not match up to any of the local predators. Blood-curdling howls that someone could differentiate from a normal wolf or coyote, with hunting dogs refusing to lead them into the direction the sounds come from. whimpering and cowering in fear. The buffalo that the LBL is so famous to have been affected. Some of the younger calves have been hunted, which would not be totally uncommon. A mountain lion or a pack of bold coyote could kill a small calf. This doesn't explain, however, the state of agitation that can be found in some of the older buffalo who would have little to no fear from a solitary mountain lion. European settlers first coming upon the land would also tell of adult buffaloes themselves being found gutted, brutally killed, and half-eaten by some unknown predator. This would lead some to believe there is something much bigger and much more sinister. There are whispers of something unnatural lurking the territories of the LBL, and thus people began to blame the most frightful creature. Spotted every now and then for terrorizing the land, they call it the beast of the LBL. Almost all descriptions match up consistently. It stands a little over 7 feet tall, the creature itself looking like a wolf standing and walking on its hind legs, sporting clawed hands, huge jaws packed with wicked teeth, dark shaggy fur, and glowing red eyes that stare wildly at those it sees. Most typically, eyewitnesses smell it before they spot it, a rotten stench heralding the beast's arrival. With all things considered, the beast is perhaps one of America's werewolf-like creatures, like the beast of Bray Road and the rougarou, that are said to roam the dark woodlands and swamps of the undiscovered, known by some as the Dogman. The upbringing of the beast is a mystery, and many have told their own tale on the creature's origins. One of the few more popular ones being that the beast was once a Native American shaman who practiced shape-shifting, but he had abused his power in the name of evil. Others in his tribe hunted him down and killed him in wolf shape, and he placed a curse on the land, his spirit prowling the grounds as a horrific amalgamation of man and wolf. Another legend speaks of a man who left Europe in the 1800s to settle in between the rivers. This man supposedly possessed a disease that turned him mad after nightfall. The disease was believed to be genetic and passed down from parent to child over years. They remained in seclusion, never going to school or had the desire to socialize with others, until one day when they went silent. Many believe the family had died off. An investigation in the early 1900s revealed their homestead vacant and abandoned. Early accounts from French explorers and traders in the region speak of being warned of a shadowy presence of the loup-garou by Shawnee fur traders, a werewolf which the immigrants would spot only glimpses of dashing through the shadows of the tree lines, hearing howls, which was like a scream from another world, and stumbling across ghastly aftermath of its prey. Despite being considered a local legend, there are sightings that persist to this day of people seeing or otherwise being stalked by this creature. One of the most frightening of these happened to a group of Murray State University students who had been camping in the land between the lakes in 1973. A group of young men were enjoying the woods on a warm spring weekend, sitting around a fire built by their VW microbus and just generally having a fine time. As the evening began to draw, one of the students went off to the woods to answer the call of nature. When he returned to the campsite, he told his friends he had felt like something was watching him, and then he heard some sniffing in the woods. His friends joked and teased him, saying he had heard a wild hog or some other animal. The student said he had never heard anything like it before. He grew increasingly nervous as the darkness gathered. As the night grew dark, the group started to hear shuffling sounds of something large moving through the fallen leaves. It seemed to be circling their campsite, moving incredibly fast. The boys became anxious. They shined their flashlights into the woods in the direction of the footsteps, but saw nothing. And then the howling began. It was wild, insane howling, like a wolf only much louder than any wolf could ever be, and very unnatural, blood-curdling quality that made the howling sound almost like a mocking laughter. It seemed to be coming from everywhere around them, first one side of the circle of light around the fire and then to the other side. Soon the terrified campers began catching glimpses of a pair of glowing red eyes that would run past them in the dark. The terrified boys retreated into their Volkswagen bus and wisely decided not to stick around for a better view. Tearing down the road, they soon saw that they were being pursued and that a massive shadowy figure was racing behind them. Barely visible in the bus's taillight, as the bus slowed to take a corner, they felt a massive jolt, and then it seemed as if something was holding the bus back. Giving everything it had, they finally broke free and tore out of the forest, and did not stop until they were back on Murray State campus. Once back on campus, they found 4 deep gashes, like claw marks torn into the metal of their engine compartment at the back of the bus. Experienced hunters shy away from this area, but those sportsmen who are new enough to the area to scoff at the legends often come home with tales of feeling as they are being stalked through the woods. Deep holes like nests are often found dug in the woods, with tufts of long, coarsely textured grayish-brown fur found within them. Rangers in the park are routinely asked what the strange howling was that a camper heard during the night. However, one of the most persistent and notorious tales allegedly involves a tourist family in the 80s. It had no media attention at all. It was kept hush-hush, and a sacred silence was demanded on all of those involved. It could never get out. It was a few weeks before the beginning of tourist season. Tourists were what locals survive on. They are their bread and butter. A story like this would be like screaming "shark" at a Daytona beach. The people would stop coming. Police were called to the area by an individual who happened to drive by a camper trailer, spotting something laying on the ground, along with the door to the trailer being busted. What they showed up to investigate was a grisly scene, a night of family fun and relaxation, ruined and dashed by a rage of a psychopathic madman or an animal. What was lying on the ground in front of the trailer was a father's body. His upper torso, excluding head, was found a few meters from the door, which had been bashed and left at a crooked slant. He was completely torn apart. Next, they went inside the RV, which looked like a slaughterhouse, with blood caked on the walls, crimson handprints dragged in them. The mother was found in the kitchen. Cause of death, while not officially listed as of yet, will be from either blood loss or significant trauma to the head and chest. The body was almost intact of the 3 found on the scene, but shows clear signs of being partially devoured. Her fingertips were torn and ragged, hinting that she attempted to fight off her attacker to the best of her ability. Sticking to her bloodied fingers and under whatever nails were left was a strange dark hair, which police took as evidence. They searched the camper more, and despite the 2 bodies, they met nothing preparing them for such an act carried out on a child. They found a boy, possibly 10, maybe 12, in the bathroom, most likely attempting to hide. The body showed clear signs of mutilation, and there was, in 3 separate pieces with 2 pieces, the torso, including head, lacking left arm and right leg, found on the bathroom's floor. And the rest, left arm and head, found in the shower box. Again, obvious animal signs were found, such as deep marks done by a sharp instrument on the doorway and body. Yet, there were often 4 slashes in one spot, with a smaller digit. This overall shape gave the impression of claws. Overwhelming as it was, the police found one last detail, a shred of a small Cinderella pajama shirt. It was then realized there was a fourth member of this unfortunate family, a little girl, possibly 5 or 6. She wasn't on the crime scene, so they instigated a search party hoping that she was alive somewhere, hiding. From somewhere in the nearby woods, about 50 yards from the campfire, a scream was heard. A man shrieked and turned into a long wail, then a whimper. As others arrived, they could see the gleam of several flashlights that a police officer was holding his hat in one hand, his light in the other. There was blood on his face, the front of his shirt, and on the brim of his hat. More blood could be seen dripping on him. It was coming from above. High in the trees, the flashlight swung, searching for a source of this mysterious bleeding. A very small hand could be seen dangling down from a tree limb way up high, as well as a slender, lifeless leg, that still had a white sock on it. The missing child had been located. The blood first hit his hat, making him look up, and then feeling the thick, cold fluid sprinkling on his face, then sliding down his neatly buttoned shirt. It had been that officer that had screamed. The little girl had apparently been carried up the tree and leisurely eaten upon while carefully laid across a large tree branch. More of some of the long gray and brown hair had been found sticking on the bark of the tree. From saliva found on the victims of the mysterious hair found and DNA tests were done, and later came back with unknown species of origin. The closest animal that they could compare it to was a Canis lupus, the wolf. As for the beast of the LBL, no one knows really what it is, or if it actually exists, but it remains an unsettling case of what may or may not have happened. Something very strange and dangerous indeed roams the wilderness of the land between the lakes. Western Kentucky's first recorded Sasquatch sighting. Early in the summer of 1902, at around 11 o'clock in the evening, 2 men were walking down the road near Center Furnace, in now what is known as the land between the lakes, when they encountered a strange animal, a fierce-looking beast lurking in the darkness. William Littlejohn and William McWaters, both of Trigg County, did not tell their story to the papers until weeks later, but relayed their sighting very vividly. The beast was 6 feet tall, covered in hair. It reared and growled upon seeing the 2 Williams. The men swore it was ape-like, even stating they thought it was a gorilla. Littlejohn raised his gun and fired 3 times. Perhaps we in the local and family history department are a little too eager to even suggest that this story smacks of Sasquatch sightings. After all, we are a department which strives toward and prides itself on hard, accurate research. But we do like our mysteries and oddball stories as well. And really, just how likely is it that 2 men saw a gorilla in western Kentucky in 1902? There were no stories of zoo escapes or overturned circus trains. While the Bigfoot sighting craze didn't truly hit its stride until 1950s, accumulating with the release of the notorious Patterson Bigfoot video in the late 60s, legends abound in oral traditions of ape-like creatures wandering the woods, mountains, and countryside, and not just in the United States, but on every continent except Antarctica. The Yeti from the Himalayas, the Yowie in Australia, the Yurn of China. The Native American history is rich with stories of giant man beasts, dozens of them, across the nation and into Canada. In fact, a British Columbian tribe gave us now the common term Sasquatch. Western Kentucky has its own Bigfoot legacy. The Chickasaw, who first settled the region, had a legend about a lofa, a long-haired bipedal creature who roamed the woods at night and overpowered its foes with body odor. Claims of Sasquatch sightings in the LBL area have been made as recently as 2011. Other claims throughout Kentucky are cataloged by the Kentucky Bigfoot Research Organization. There's a story in the Paducah Sun from October 1897 which claimed a wild man was roaming the Lovelace-ville section of Paducah. This man-beast was later discovered merely to be a large sow with missing ears. However, no such claim was ever made about the creature that Little John and McWaters stumbled across that summer evening in 1902. Little John raised his gun and fired 3 times. The beast fell to the ground, and after struggling for a few seconds, dragged itself off into the woods, growling ferociously, and could be heard for quite a distance. Neither man chose to follow the creature that night, but McWaters went back the next morning and witnessed a trail the creature left by dragging its hindquarters through the brush. Curiously, McWaters found no trace of blood. Little John and McWaters stated that they had seen a gorilla that night, and perhaps, by some accident, a circus or miracle of migration they actually had. The theory of Occam Razor would suggest that the creature was a black bear, though you'd think country boys like those would have known a bear if they saw one. Besides black bear, which were never very common in western Kentucky anyway, were essentially eliminated from the whole state of Kentucky by the early 1900s. So maybe, just maybe, there's an inkling of truth to the old Chickasaw legend of the lofa. Maybe, just maybe, Little John and McWaters can be listed as the 2 men who made western Kentucky's first recorded Sasquatch sighting. So, a couple of interesting historic sightings and attacks that we are familiar with. Maybe no one's ever heard about the McWaters Bigfoot sighting of 1902. Interestingly enough, though, when a large bipedal wolf-like creature is around, we start to notice that wild animals start to disappear, pets start to disappear. Deer declining at Land Between the Lakes. Officials at the Land Between the Lakes National Recreation Area says hunters should expect more restrictive deer hunting regulations for the season of 2016. Kentucky archery deer hunters can expect more restrictive regulations for the Land Between the Lakes for 2016-2017. The reason? Deer numbers are dwindling on the 40-mile-long, 10-mile-wide, heavily timbered peninsula that separates Lake Barclay and Kentucky Lake. That includes parts of Lyon and Trigg County in Kentucky and Stewart County in Tennessee, according to the LBL Wildlife Program Manager Steve Blomer. We have seen a decline in deer numbers, said Blomer, especially on the Kentucky side. Major change for Kentucky hunters will be the elimination of a bonus deer, with the exception of the LBL youth quota hunt. All deer taken off the LBL in 2016 will count toward the regular season's bag limit. Currently, LBL deer are bonus deer and do not count towards the statewide bag. The archery deer bag limit will also be reduced from 2 to 1, and the Kentucky LBL archery season will be trimmed to make it concurrent with the Tennessee LBL archery hunt, which typically opens in late September and runs through early January. Neither Kentucky State Wildlife nor federal LBL game officials could provide an estimate of the LBL deer herd, but both Blomer and Gabe Jenkins, deer program coordinator for Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife Resources, are convinced that the LBL deer numbers are in decline. We have seen a pretty significant population decline, noted Jenkins, and they're concerned about it. So, you can kind of write off you can kind of write off rabbit or squirrel or, pheasant, stuff like that. Decline to coyote, bobcat, what have you. But when a large number of deer start to decline, and we're not talking 20s, we're talking hundreds, maybe thousands, start to decline, then there's something strange going on. There's an apex predator in that area, taking out mass amounts of deer. Why? Because they're so large, not the deer, but the predator is so large that it needs to consume on the next largest prey, which would be deer, maybe buffalo. But deer are, I'm assuming, easier for a dogman to hunt. How about you? What do you think? Anyway, that just points to me that the dogmen are alive and well in LBL. Up near the LBL, and there's a place called the Vampire Hotel that was actually a foundation for a hotel during the 20s that was torn down in the 90s. Now, I've never personally met a vampire in Murray or around LBL, and I have no clue as to why people call it the Vampire Hotel, but we have spent many nights partying there. We never saw anything weird except for melting candles. I do, however, have a story that was told to me by my two uncles at the bottom near Marshall County in Callaway, very close to Kentucky Lake, which is the LBL basically. It scared the crap out of me when I was a kid because they swore they would never go back to the area. They were real outdoorsmen who didn't get scared, so I thought. The story goes that my two uncles were coon hunting and they had 3 coon dogs with them, their best by their account. And they heard a yelp ahead. Well, the 2 dogs went running by them like they were being chased, and the other was nowhere to be found. Now, most people don't know this, but most coon dogs are mean and do not back down from anything, not in West Kentucky anyway. My uncle said when he saw the dogs running back toward them, something bad was going on because that had never happened. He said they made their way to where they heard the yelp and found the missing dog. It had been attacked by something, and he had to shoot it because it was hurt so bad. They had no clue what could have done this other than a bear or something really big. But in this area of the country, we really have no big predators that we know of. A black bear was spotted in northwest Tennessee in the early 2000s, but never at the LBL. Now the real weird stuff started happening, they said. When they were shining their lights around the dog body, they said they didn't see any tracks, and then they heard a loud scream behind them where they had just been. It was like nothing they had ever heard, they said. Well, at this point they decided to drag Butt back to the truck, and something threw a rock or something at them. They couldn't tell what was being thrown, but it flew through the air and hit the tree. On their way back to the truck, they said they kept hearing things in the brush, and then they would hear something in the trees, like they were being stalked by something, but it was able to get into the trees, and they never did see anything except branches moving like something had just been there. They said they fired some shots to try to scare whatever it was away from stop following them, but whatever it was followed them all the way back to their truck. When they got to the truck, the other 2 dogs were lying by their cages, and he said they never hunted that area again. Now, this was told to me by 2 uncles who did their fair share of drinking while hunting, and you only coon hunt at night, so it was definitely dark, but I see no reason for them to lie about it. I know the dog died anyway. I can only add that I have never seen either of them scared, especially hunting, but they said something was out there that they never encountered before, and they lived here their whole lives since the 40s. Something killed my uncle's favorite dog, which I would have thought would have made him mad more than anything and made him want to kill whatever it was, but he swore he'd never go back there. I don't know how the exact bottom they were hunting, but I am going to take a look at the county map and try to pinpoint it. I moved to a small town near the LBL when I was 16. That was in the late 80s. I'd left Detroit and moved into the country with my dad. There is a lot of old ground in that area, and I would spend hours in the woods without seeing anyone. 2 things struck me as odd about the area. Number 1, I was given a shotgun and told never to go into the woods unarmed, which was odd because Detroit, my dad always told me not to get involved with guns. Number 2, there were signs along the roads back then that said, "Do not exit your vehicle during hours of darkness." They said to lock your doors and turn on your hazard lights and wait for part services. I'd always assumed it was due to an amount of illegal activity that took place at the LBL. They used to make moonshine in that area. I was stationed at Fort Campbell and used to hike the LBL several times a week up until last year. I never saw anything out of the ordinary, but I stayed on the well-used trails. I used to believe that werewolves were fake until I saw one summer. It was around dusk and I had settled in, but it was still light enough to see. All of a sudden my friend busts in the front door, yelling about something in the neighboring field. I decide to entertain him and I follow him to the field. We walked about a half a mile. I still didn't see anything, and I wanted to be back instead. So I reluctantly followed, and just before we reached the old slaughterhouse, I saw a rather large canine about 70 feet away. It was sitting on its haunches, and I thought it was just a big dog until it stood up on both legs and ran to the old slaughterhouse. Both of us thought it was a good idea to head for the hills, so we ran back to my house. It followed us. By then it was dark, so we were about to retreat to my house and lock up. And then came a smell so foul and terrible. I still remember it. That terrible smell is only comparable to rotten flesh. Just then it ran in front of us about 30 feet away. I estimate its height to be 6.5 to 7 feet tall. We bolted in and stayed there for the rest of the night, but the dogs in the neighborhood would not stop barking. We went outside the next morning. The smell still lingered. The smell stayed for days, and on the third night, around midnight, the sound of a window being forced out woke me up. I took my knife and explored and found that a window pane had been completely forced out without breaking. After that, the smell disappeared, and I haven't seen anything since. There is no explanation for an animal, and there was no evidence, so I did not tell anyone about this. I live near the LBL, and people tell stories of creatures like this. Let's discuss some of the strange disappearances. Indian mound woman found in LBL. Stewart County Sheriff Derek Wyatt said a body of a missing Indian mound woman was discovered Friday morning in the Land Between the Lakes recreation area. Authorities had been looking for Heather Newman, who was reported missing on Tuesday. It's still under investigation, but I can say it's an apparent suicide. The sheriff would not elaborate on any details. Newman's husband contacted the sheriff's office around 2:30 p.m. on May 19, 2015, to report that he had not heard from his wife since earlier that day, which was very unusual. Investigators said Newman left her workplace in Clarksville that morning, went to her home, and then left. Authorities began getting information about Newman and the description of her vehicle she was driving. Wyatt said a citizen saw a blue Ford Expedition in LBL and reported it. Newman's body was found 7:30 a.m. near the lake. Update: her body was found in the LBL recreation area on Friday. Cause of death still under investigation. The 28-year-old was last seen driving a 2003 blue Expedition, leaving her residence in the afternoon of May 19, 2015. She was wearing pink nursing scrubs, pink and yellow earrings, black nursing shoes similar to Crocs, black squared framed glasses. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail with a pink band. She's described as white, 5'1", and weighs 125 pounds. Now, I went and I researched a little bit about this. Let me repeat that. I kind of leaned over. I went and researched a little bit about this, and I watched a video her husband did on the news. And it was sad to see, because it was almost like a written kind of interview, like the reporters or the police department wrote it out for him. The woman was not suicidal, according to the husband. She had a good life, a good job. So none of that made sense. October 25th or 24th, 2005, missing man found in the LBL area. A man was found dead following the search of the land between the lakes in Lyon County. 46-year-old man was found dead Sunday morning by police dogs under the direction of Kentucky State Trooper Mike Turnbow and Beth Inman, canine investigator with the McCracken County Coroner Office. He was pronounced dead at the scene by Lyon County Coroner Ron Pedersen. There is no anything talking about this case. All it says was they found his truck in the area during a search that extended into the evening hours but did not locate him, according to the news release. The search for him began after family members contacted police October 14th. He did not report to work, had not been seen by friends since October 11th. Very strange. Then 2 bodies found at the lake. Autopsies are being performed by the Regional Medical Center in Madisonville. 2 bodies found by Lake Barclay, Devil Elbow Recreation Area. It was an unidentified adult male, while the other body is an unidentified adult female. There are several more stories that we've heard about of this werewolf or Dogman of the LBL. There were groups of Boy Scouts that have seen it. Several campers, fishermen, and boaters had seen it from the safety of their boats floating in some of the many bays that touch upon the shoreline. Hikers and bikers have heard the howling and seen something stalking them while on the rural trails, hiding amongst the trees and foliage. Have run across deer carcasses that have been brutally torn apart. In the meantime, others have come forward with their own experiences with first-hand instinct to run from a fierce, elusive creature, reports of feeling being watched, hearing howls, or coming across badly mutilated carcasses of deer and other wildlife. All of them agreed that this was no Bigfoot or Sasquatch. The most recent sighting comes to us from Labor Day 2017 in the area of Lake Barclay. In August of 2010, another sighting was very descriptive. The following happened from Cadiz, Kentucky, following Cadiz, Kentucky, Cadiz, C-A-D-I-Z, Kentucky. Follow 68 west heading toward land between the lakes. Turn right onto 1489 to Lake Barclay Resort and Marina. The incident took place about 2 miles up from the Kentucky 1489 road from Kentucky 68. The area of the sighting took place in a heavily wooded area along the edge of the main road connecting Kentucky 68 to Lake Barclay Resort and Marina. The witness described the creature as approximately 7.5 feet tall, 3 feet wide, stocky with matted, medium brown fur. She first saw the deer break brush run alongside her vehicle, quickly dashing in front of her van and across the road. She originally mistook the creature for a tree or bush, but realized the creature was chasing behind the deer. She said as it passed right outside the driver's side window, it seemed to have a surprised look on its eyes. The creature was so close to the vehicle, she could have reached out and touched it. The creature did not cross in front of her after the deer, and encounter only lasted a few seconds. She could no longer see it as soon as it was out of her headlights. Her husband was also in the vehicle, but only her son saw it as well. The witness was very forthcoming and genuine describing the sighting. Other reports from the 70s and 80s claim a creature stalked and brutally killed a family of 4. Another says a bow hunter was killed and torn apart by the same creature. Almost all the incidents concerning the beast come from the areas north of Highway 68 and 80. Bigfoot sightings have come from various areas nearby, but not in the area of the Dogman. Strange, a person who actually saw the Dogman shared their experience. She described the odor of the creature, the same as the other sightings. May of 2012 near Wrangler's Camp. She's only spoken of this to one other person. She had hiked a short distance up a hill when she unexpectedly came fairly close to the beast sitting and watching her. It let out the most blood-curdling snarl she had ever heard. She stated she was frozen with terror and began to pray. Finally, when it stood up, she described the creature as massive, 7 feet tall with large canine. Finally, the beast left in one direction and she ran fast in the other. She has never been back there since. Now, we heard mention of a couple of landmarks, so I'm going to give you some history of those landmarks. The Vampire Hotel is an abandoned structure near Kentucky Lake in the land between the lakes. The stone and concrete structure was partially torn down in the 60s with the creation of the LBL, but part of it still remained. It's one of just a handful of remaining structures in the LBL not completely removed. Throughout the 90s, it had become a popular hangout spot with locals, some of whom are less reputable. The structure itself was a single-story home that belonged to Dorothy B. Keith. The stone and frame home was built sometime after the creation of Kentucky Lake and was used as a vacation home. The home was fairly luxurious at the time. It featured a walkout basement into a stone-shaped archway. In the middle of the patio was a cistern, which is still visible today. Bathrooms and staircases flanked the building, going to the first level, which contained a large chimney. The chimney also went down into the basement and had a fireplace on each side. Inside the basement was a large room with several large windows, which would have provided a grand view of the Kentucky Lake. The walkout basement was symmetrical, which would have suggested some type of commercial business, such as a hotel. The one exception to the symmetry was a room in the back of the basement toward the right. It is unclear what this room was used for, but what we do know is that this was a residence, not a hotel. Other features of the property include a sandbox to the north of the home, which is completely intact. Also marked on the property sketch at the right of the location is pathways, roads leading to the home. A stone pathway and paved road leads to the home are still intact. The walkout basement was torn down initially in the 60s and remained until sometime in 97. So up until then, it was one of the few remaining covered structures in the LBL due to its close proximity to US 68 and its overall mysterious flair. It became a popular place to hang out. Despite numerous rumors, nothing substantial has ever occurred in this site. Some of the rumors include animal sacrifices, blood drinking rituals. No vampires, murders, or anything of that nature has happened with the Vampire Hotel spray painted across the front of the building. This site really received national media attention in 96 and 97 after an infamous incident that did not occur at the site took place, which we are not going to go into details in the incident. But this site clearly has nothing to do with it. National media attention included NBC's Unsolved Mystery, which carried some footage from the site. After all the negative publicity, the remaining portion of the hotel was torn down. Also today we heard mention of the Hotel California. This clearly was not a hotel, not big enough, but surely it wasn't a house due to its concrete block and somewhat fortified build. It was a home. It was built sometime before the creation of the LBL by a riverboat captain named Grover Marlar. He built the place as a retirement home for him and his wife. There were some old photos. The home had a driveway leading up to it from Old State Highway, Kentucky 522, the old logging road. It's on an old logging road. So nothing ever occurred there as well. It's just a creepy building that gives a flare of mystery to the LBL. I mean, you've got creepy buildings, you have supposed military gun ports or structures, which there are no photos of. I've been searching for them online, and I'm sure people will find them, but they really are not. Here's the thing. I found some photos of supposed LBL gun ports, and I reverse Google searched them, and they were not. They were from somewhere else in the country. So when doing research, you really have to kind of just, can't take it at face value. You've got to really look deep into it and kind of debunk yourself. You know, you got to debunk the debunk, I guess, if that's the best way of saying it. But yeah, I mean, the LBL is steeped in mystery, steeped in paranormal. Here's a little bit more for you. There's supposed to be a phantom trucker. A trucker was allegedly killed in an accident, and now his ghostly truck follows patrons through the land between the lakes at night, but disappears before leaving the park. Supposedly, the sightings are focused on 68 and 80. This is a very creepy and final part of the upload. A man familiar with this area and its folklore, having disregarded all of the scary stories, he had camped in this area many times and was unconcerned with what may be hiding in the shadows. On this particular night, his opinion changed. Him and his friends decided to camp on the northeast side of the land between the lakes, on the bank of Lake Barclay. Now, mainly all of the sightings of the Dogman have been on the north side. Him and his wife pitched their tent on a hill while their friends made camp on the shore about 30 feet below. As night fell and darkness came over the campground, he began to feel an overwhelming sense of dread and urgency to move his tent. He described his experience as though someone was watching him, or at least he was not alone. A very sensible and logical man, he couldn't shake the feeling of fright and found it absolutely necessary to relocate his makeshift dwelling. Some may brush this feelings off as part of the course while being backcountry camping. After all, being completely outside of your element can put you on edge. But the stories don't end with this one. His friends returned to the same location sometime later and built their campfire. These are God-fearing, church-going people. I don't think they're scared about anything. During the campfire, all three at once became overwhelmed by a very sinister sensation. One began to cry. The others turned to look in the darkness and saw a face peering back at them. As quickly as they could, they left the area and never went back.
And there you have it, folks. I do hope you all enjoyed this early morning, middle of the night bonus as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. I'd like to thank you all for supporting the channel. It is, after all, your support that keeps this channel growing and going, and what gives us all a place and a chance to share our experiences and theories judgment-free. Everyone is simply treated with the respect that we deserve. Please, everyone, stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, pets, family, and friends. These creatures are real, they are out there and dangerous. Share this information with those you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions, never stop searching for the truth, and God bless you all.